Thank you. Good morning. It's incredibly disappointing that after months of bipartisan negotiations on legislation to try to confront some of the problems that we're facing from China and to try to bring legislation that would get tough on China, Speaker Pelosi jettisoned much of that negotiation to instead try to bring a backdoor Build Back Better bill to the floor. If you look at this bill, and it's probably appropriately called the America Concedes to China Act, when you look at the provisions and the gifts they give to China, it misses the mark on so many fronts. And Chairman McCall talked about some of the things that we wanted to do. You can look at things like the Chips for America Act, but then you look at so many of the other things we wanted to do to get tough on China that Speaker Pelosi backed away from. And what did she replace it with? $54 billion in new mandatory spending at a time when inflation is through the roof. Families are pleading with Washington to stop the spending, to get control over inflation that is tied to Washington spending. Speaker Pelosi's answer is to double down and try to add $54 billion in new automatic mandatory spending. They create slush funds all throughout this bill that we're whipping against, including an $8 billion fund that has been used to give taxpayer money to China. Imagine this. I've not gotten a single call from a constituent asking to give more money, their hard-earned money, to China. Yet China's gotten $100 million already from this slush fund, and Speaker Pelosi wants to add another $8 billion of American taxpayer money to a slush fund that's given over $100 million of our hard-earned tax dollars to China? This is lunacy. There's so many other things in this bill that are going to make things worse. But look at what they're doing. The same party that has embraced the defund the police movement, that will not stand up against district attorneys in America who won't prosecute criminals here when we've got a crime wave, they're creating, they call it like a global warming police force. I think they call them climate change officers all around the globe, paid for by taxpayers here in America to send climate change officers all around the globe. We need more police here in America, not people going around the globe shutting down manufacturing and giving gifts to China. So this is such a misguided bill. No surprise that there's not a single mention of China in President Biden's statement of administrative policy. But it shows you where their focus is at a time when we should be bringing bills to the floor this week, last week, next week, to focus on the challenges Americans are facing, which is inflation, high gas prices, an out-of-control border, crime that's out of control in most American cities. You look at foreign policy debacles from Afghanistan to the weaknesses that have now led us to where we are with Russia and Ukraine. That's where the focus should be, and unfortunately it's not. It's why, as we work to get the majority back, we will be confronting these challenges. And we're going to continue to lay out alternatives that would actually get our country back on track, face the challenges that we have today that the Democrats won't deal with, including the COVID mismanagement. You look at right now school kids that are, if they're even able to go into the classroom, mandates. We've been asking for guidance from CDC to look at some of the studies that are out there that show the harm that's being done to kids, keeping them out of school, putting mandates in place on kids when the leaders that are putting the mandates in place don't even wear the masks that they're forcing the kids to make. And I think it's those double standards that are infuriating parents all across the country who want and deserve control over their kids' education. So those are the things that we're going to be confronting. And in the meantime, February 18th is right around the corner. Isn't it interesting that government funding expires on February 18th and you haven't seen this leadership, the White House, the Senate Democrat majority, the House Democrat majority, bringing any bills to the floor to address what is a deadline that we all know has been out there for months? Are they going to wait till the midnight hour again and then declare some new crisis on February 18th that there's going to be some government shutdown when instead they could be dealing with it today? There's no bills on the floor today that are under a rule. They could be trying to bring bills today to stave it off instead of waiting till the midnight hour. But this is what they do. They've shown no ability to manage the government of the United States. And that's why we're going to be pushing for a change and showing the American people better alternatives. With that, we'll be happy to take some questions. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Do you see China as just passively benefiting from a divide that already exists in our country, or do you see them as actively working to deepen that divide and exploit it through disinformation or other means?
Oh, China's more than happy to encourage this divide. And again, when they see weakness in the president, a president that will not confront China on any front. We've been calling for over a year to have hearings on the origins of COVID. And what do they put in this bill? They put a provision in this bill that says it's racist to call it the Wuhan virus or the China virus. There is more and more growing evidence in the scientific community that the COVID-19 started in the Wuhan lab. In fact, there were emails uncovered just a few weeks ago where there were conversations with Dr. Fauci's top advisors, a number of whom were suggesting that it was not a genome structure that could have been originated from a bat to an animal to a human, but in fact was probably genetically modified. And then there's emails between Fauci and Collins that say, hey, let's talk about this on the phone. They shut down the email conversations, which we uncovered. But then on that call, who knows what was said? We should have a hearing on it. But days later, some of those same scientists who were suggesting that COVID-19 started in the lab and was genetically modified reversed course and said it would be a conspiracy theory to suggest that it started in the lab. Shouldn't we know the answers about that? We've asked, by the way, for hearings to find out what really happened on that phone call between the top advisors over at NIH and CDC. We haven't gotten a response. I think the American people want to know an answer to those questions. When you look at the deaths all across the globe, you look still in America, some of these governors and mayors want to shut down their communities. People are ready to get back to their lives. We should have these answers, and we still don't. So we're going to keep pressing for these answers. And if we're in the majority, we will have hearings to get to the bottom of these serious questions. Yeah.
Now the Supreme Court has not dived into the proxy voting question. Have you heard from any members of your conference interested in keeping proxy voting should you all take the majority of that?
We're going to get Congress working in person again. I know Leader McCarthy has talked about this. We will end proxy voting, but we'll also get committees meeting in person again. You know, you look all across America, most people are getting back to work in person. They recognize that, you know, people that want to take precautions can take whatever precautions they want, but we've got to open things up again. And it hurts the legislative process when we're not meeting in person. When you don't have a committee meeting where, you know, if you're on a Zoom screen and you've got one person over here on this screen and somebody else on that side of the screen, you don't get the amendment process working like you used to. You used to have a good, robust, bipartisan committee process where you could actually resolve some of those disagreements in committee because you could walk down the aisle on the dais and talk to somebody from the other party to work through a challenge. Committees do that all the time, and maybe people forgot because they haven't seen it happen in 2 years. We have to get back to that, and we will get back to that when we take the majority. Yes?
I have two questions. The first one's for you. You said that Speaker Pelosi stripped some tough on China provisions. If you could be more specific about those. And then the second one is for Representative McCall. You mentioned Xinjiang. I was wondering, there are sanctions to prevent the forced labor in Xinjiang. Why does that not go far enough?
Well, let me ask, because Chairman McCall's chairman of the China Task Force has been doing incredible work on laying out policies to be tough on China, but he's also been actively involved in the negotiations that were going on for months before Speaker Pelosi jettisoned and tried to go to a backdoor Build Back Better. So I'll ask Chairman McCall if he wants to address.
Sure.